take you in a few minutes and show you how to begin sign cutting.
It's a different environment going into a woodland environment versus working in a close quarter battle.
The ground cover can vary from 1 square foot to the next. That's what makes your vision something that you really need to watch when you're out here. They're looking at an impression in the ground that is definitely a human footprint.
Without that art as another tool, basically you're aimlessly walking through the woods.
You've got a pretty good indication that somebody came through here. This is good sign.
Man Tracking and Small Unit Tactics, Fundamentals for the Tracking Team, Volume 1. Tracking is surely rooted in the earliest people groups that had a need to hunt for survival. Since there was no recorded evidence as to these people's tracking arts, it would be mere speculation to discuss such history. However, it is logical to conclude that to hunt and survive, that early man was forced to hunt, track, and develop with certainty his survival skills. We can look at recent history, even American history, and find that tracking was a way of life and survival for these settlers of the Americas. In 1759, Major Robert Rogers of New Hampshire organized 9 companies of colonists to fight for the British during the French and Indian War. Rogers was also credited with the development of the elite infantry designation of Ranger. His troops were known as Rogers Rangers. There is evidence in the standing orders for Rogers Rangers that his troops were well aware of the art of tracking and used these skills quite effectively. Much of the history of tracking and its significance in the life of man has become lost throughout the years. Ironically, tracking as a skill has begun to make a comeback, even in the military units who boast of legendary successes. It seems to be a part of the makeup of man to search for easier, less time-consuming ways to do any task. However, in the arts, such as tracking and survival, there is little ability to improve what has been tested and proven over probably thousands of years. We can only enhance our abilities to higher performance. No matter how advanced we become, the principles of transference and disturbance will always remain consistent. As these principles apply to crime scene investigation, they also apply to tracking. A few of the professions experiencing this renewal are the communities of law enforcement, the military, search and rescue, and groups of private instructors whose enthusiasm has become contagious throughout the civilian population. The intent of this video is to familiarize you with the fundamentals of tracking and how the art can enhance and complement your current programs. If your search and rescue or your tactical team does not currently have trackers, or you have not integrated tracking into your basic lesson plan, we would strongly recommend your consideration of the topic. Tracking will enhance an investigator's ability to conduct crime scene investigations. It can help your street officer's ability to solve street-level crime. Don't be fooled by thinking that tracking is just for the outdoorsmen or those officers who are inclined toward hunting and camping. There is much to be learned with regard to logical progressions and crime solving. Recently, David Hinderman, the director of OSI Special Investigations and Consulting Group, was teaching in a tracking class. There were several law enforcement agents in the class who were becoming quite skilled in their knowledge of tracking. 2 of the agents located a tripwire that was barely visible to the human eye. The wire was a binary loop device used for early warning. The wire itself was barely larger than a human hair. Conversely, an agent from another agency had tripped a simulated trap and was beginning to stomp around in the woods looking for more signs.
Our guys did a lot of work yesterday. They worked real hard. It's a different environment going into a woodland environment versus working in a close quarter battle like in a house, things like that. The guys that we saw yesterday were concentrating so hard on the tracking. You have to implement and keep your sights open. Spread your view out and don't get so concentrated and to where you get tunnel vision. It's very concentrate on keeping your spacing and working on your patrol techniques.
Well, basically the tracker is more, he's got the tunnel vision pretty much because he's focalized looking down towards the ground. The security guy keeps the perimeter, basically watches his back.
You have to keep your sights open where you've got your tracker, your one focused main tracker, and your security man up front actually doing the tracking, coming back to your team where they're going to be spread out a little bit more, and they are the main security body of that patrol or of that search party. And you have to keep those 2 items separate. It's important that you do that. Getting an experienced tracking instructor that you have to be careful about. People like Lieutenant Tyson are experts in the field and extremely helpful, and can be extremely helpful to any tactical team.
Gentlemen, our training exercise this morning involves a lost hunter. We want to try to locate that hunter using the art of man tracking. I'm going to take you in a few minutes and show you how to begin sign cutting. That's looking for the first track in order to start tracking the individual. I know that during an actual search for a lost person, there'll be a lot more equipment out here, a lot more things going on at one time other than visual searching.
Ab Taylor's approach to teaching what he calls track awareness is quite effective for search and rescue and basic introduction to tracking for civilian purposes. On the other hand, it is important to keep in mind that tactical tracking requires a completely different mindset. The tactical team must maintain tactical awareness, cover and concealment, stealth, and may have a completely different set of criteria than the search and rescue unit, the hunter, or the tracking enthusiast. This project will not make you a tracker or even qualify you to operate tactically in a woodland environment. However, if you listen and watch carefully, you should be able to pull a good bit of relevant information and apply it to your skills and your team. We hope this project will lay the foundation for you to begin your journey into the world of tracking. Reading from the journal of David Henderman, the producer of this program, it is interesting to note the progression of tracking and the influence it has made in his personal life. As a young man growing up in Kentucky, most of my extra time was spent on a family farm where I hunted and hiked and sought after adventures just as every other kid in the world. Although I had never put names to the techniques or realized that I was working step by step, I was laying a foundation that would influence the rest of my life. I happened to be tracking a deer one afternoon. I knew I was on the deer's trail, but what I didn't know was that I had moved so quietly following the trail that when I looked up, there I was face to face with a beautiful doe. In the college years, we would what we call survival hike on the weekends. After several encounters with potentially fatal scenarios and almost getting shot, I had fallen head over heels for the art of tracking. It was Ab Taylor that said, "There's a little story on the ground, not a fairy tale, a story. Read it to me." As a young man, I became infatuated with the novels that only the woods could tell. Now, a number of years later, I have used these skills at all levels of my law enforcement career. Some of the best cases I have solved, the methodology came from those years spent in the woods. One of the best examples was a burglary we solved by the use of a footprint found on the scene. As an added bonus, almost 100 burglaries were cleared based on the evidence of this case. General terminology: track or print. A track is an impression left from the passage of a person that can positively be identified as human. There are three main classifications of a track or print. They are as follows: complete, partial, compression.
In looking at this particular area here, the first thing noticeable is a slight partial heel print right in here. We see that horseshoe shape and even see some of the lug markings in the heel. But let's go a little bit further. We got some rocks here, some of which are still in place. If you shake them, try to move them with your finger, they're lodged in the ground. But some, like this one right here, here's one. There's another one that seemed to be dislodged from where it's rolled over completely, I believe, out of its little socket. So you take all of that from the heel at this point here up to about this point would denote just about the length of a shoe print as it came through here. That's one of the ways to again test your ground, is to try to feel things. Don't just look and try to determine exactly where the foot went, because this was loose and this is not. So right in here, right in this area here is where the foot landed.
Sign. Any evidence of change from the natural state that is inflicted on the area by a person's passage.
In man tracking, obviously we're talking about human passage. Animals in a wilderness area certainly leave their own sign, but since we're talking about man tracking, we want to limit that to man-made sign. In most cases, when someone says they have a track or a print, and those two definitions are pretty much the same, then we can assume that if they know what they're talking about, they're looking at an impression in the ground that is definitely a human footprint by nature of its size and the markings inside that area that is a shoe print or a moccasin or whatever footwear the person's wearing. Whereas sign, when you say I have sign, you could mean anything, any evidence of change from the natural state of vegetation or ground cover that might denote human passage.
Sign cutting. Looking for sign in order to establish a starting point in which to begin tracking.
A lot of times searchers or any kind of exercise you might be on, whether it be a training exercise or a real situation, they might not know the point of the origin of the track. They might have to use a natural terrain, creek banks, hillsides, or something like that to try to find an area that is an area that would hold good sign easily if somebody came through there, and then from that area try to find the first good definite print, and from there they begin the tracking. But sign cutting is simply looking for a place to start tracking. We're looking here at an area of pine needles which can be very difficult to track in. Fortunately, if you can see the pushed up pine needles right in this area, in fact some of them are pushed up against this green plant here, compare that particular section of the ground with this, and you'll see a definite change in the rhythm of the pine needles and the lines and shape of the ground cover. We also have another green plant that's been pushed over in its entirety here where the foot kind of drug through, and beyond that the same type of leaf here that is creased, green leaf, and some pine needles up on it. The whole plant is pushed to the left side there. This is far too much sign or change in the ground cover to be made by an animal. It would be very close to conclusive human passage just by these three things that we see here, these three different types of sign all in one area. This is very indicative of a human passage when the pine needles are pushed up that way. Even though this is difficult terrain to track in sometimes, this is good sign. Another area of sign, and this has several examples. We've got a fairly good footprint right in there where you can see that low-lying vegetation pushed down and mashed. Right up in here, some of the kudzu leaves have been turned over, so we're seeing the lighter underside compared to the dark front part. And the vines of the kudzu back through here have been pulled along with the footprint, and you can actually see, pull some of this back, see that definite path where things have been pushed forward, a direction of travel leading right through here. Very good sign. If we were trying to track somebody from one side of this creek to the other, and we came upon an area that had that moss, lichen, and any of that soft plant material, we'd want to use that as an indicator and try to see if there's sign in there, because certainly if somebody went across that particular area, being as soft as it is, they'd leave pretty good sign. So yeah, we'd use that to our advantage if we were trying to go across there. There's a lot of different sign out there we haven't talked about. One of the main things I think we ought to be aware of when we're out there looking for tracks is a sign, if you will, that people leave that's man-made. Cigarette butts, candy wrappers, chewing gum, general trash in the wooded areas. In fact, right here behind us we have a pretty good example of that in the way of a soft drink cup that somebody left out here. So people's passage through an area takes on a lot of different form. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's stuff we bring out here that we don't need to leave.
Tracking. Following someone or something by stringing together a continuous chain of sign. There are several methods by which one can track. For purposes of this video, we will not go into these specific definitions and the means by which they are conducted. Two excellent books that deal with these topics are The Fundamentals of Man Tracking and Tracking, a Blueprint for Learning How by Jack Kearney. However, for the purposes of this video, we will discuss the method developed by Ab Taylor called the step-by-step method of tracking. Step-by-step is defined as where a tracker sees each step in sequence and proceeds no further than the last visible track, using the stride to determine where next to look for sign. When looking for a lost person, a non-lethal fugitive, or runaway, This method would highly be suggested. The strengths of the method are found in the preservation of evidence. There is variance given to this method due to practicality. Small gaps is the term used by Ab Taylor in referring to this modification called bracketing. Please refer to his book for more on this subject. We will also refer to tactical tracking. The tracker and the team will be forced to develop tactical awareness and pull from all resources to successfully track their target. More specifically, this means tracking and sign cutting, not allowing the intense focus necessary in step by step. By using the team as a tracking team, more ground may be covered. It will be necessary to develop a clear understanding of cuttable areas and track traps. The ability to develop an investigator's logic is imperative. Tracker. A tracker must focus attention of stringing track and sign so as to follow the subject being tracked. Flank, flanker. The flank is a military term that simply means the lateral edge or side. A flanker is that agent or operative who covers the lateral edge or side of the team and the tracker. Generally, there will be a left and a right flanker. In search and rescue, the tracking team may consist of the tracker and two flankers. In a tactical operation, the same is true. However, there will generally be a fourth responsibility in the team called security or control. The primary responsibility of the security man is to control the team's movement and to provide security to the tracker as his attention is focused on the trail. Tracking team. A tracking team should consist of at least 3 personnel, a tracker and 2 flankers. The team should expand as the responsibility and danger to the team expands. It is possible, however, to overburden a team with members and lose the tactical advantage of a small unit. Equipment. In addition to the various equipment needed for the tracking team to perform its mission, a few items should be considered with regards to the tracker. Items are not listed in order of importance. Clothing. Although clothing may be dictated by uniforms and various team equipment, it is a good idea to have clothing that accommodates the particular weather and terrain conditions. Make sure your team and trackers are properly clothed for the operation. Also, a hat with a large brim can be helpful in shadowing the afternoon sun, not only for the comfort of the wearer, but for causing an otherwise invisible print to become visible. Measuring device. Any type of ruler will do. Measuring tracks or prints is particularly important in search and rescue. It may mean the difference in the life or death for a victim or lost person where the size or dimensions of the shoe may be the only way to distinguish a particular identity and direction of travel. Documentation for evidentiary purposes is also at times important. A team in tactical pursuit may use this after the takedown.
Most trackers would use 4 measurements on a print like this. Obviously, we don't have the shoe in front of us, so we don't know the shoe size. But we would take one measurement from the tip of the toe all the way to the center of the back edge of the heel is one complete measurement, length of shoe, and then one from the widest visible part of the sole across there, then one from the widest point of the heel, because we do have a separate heel from the sole in the print in the dirt, and then the length of the visible heel. So that way we have 4 measurements to go on, and obviously photographs and plaster cast would help also, but those would be the 4 main measurements a tracker would want to do with a single print.
Notepad, pencil, or pen. It is paramount to have the ability to keep notes. These notes may become evidence in a criminal investigation or prosecution. Oftentimes, a tracker will choose to keep a journal, similar to that of snipercraft. A tracker may use these notes to reference in future operations. Trail tape or markers. Trail tape is important in that it may be necessary to cordon off an area to protect evidence or sign. It may be valuable to mark a trail so that teams that follow may find your location and not destroy key evidence. In search and rescue, color may not be important, or bright colors may be advantageous. However, in a tactical situation, it will be important to consider the operations before marking your trail.
When we're using our tracking stick, we obviously want to be cognizant of which print we're looking for next, because let me show you what will happen if you're not trying to keep that in your mind. We said before that to measure the gait or stride of a person, our stick goes on the second heel print and we make a marker with our thumb on our stick, and that length denotes the stride. We can see that this print at the end of the stick here is a right footprint because it's pitched out to the right. This one pitches off to the left along the direction of travel. If I'm not cognizant of the fact that this is a right print, and when I go to look for the next one, I can put my marker in what I think is the right place, but if I'm not looking for a left print, one that's pitched out to the left, then my stick can be as much as 8 or 10 inches off, and my vision will be not where I need to be looking at, because once that happens about twice and I don't find a good partial print even, then I'm off course as much as 2 or 3 feet real quickly. So I really got to be careful about which one I'm looking for and mark those if I need to be. The way most folks mark them is just a line in the dirt and a line off to the side denoting a right print, and the opposite denoting a left print.
Light source. A light source is important for obvious reasons, yet for the tracker it could expose a print invisible to the human eye. It is also useful for night tracking. It may be useful to consider a red filter for tactical applications. In search and rescue, lights at night are quite helpful. Give careful consideration before tracking at night using lights in a tactical operation. A small mirror. A mirror is a good tool to have in one's kit. Besides for tactical reasons, a small mirror is good for reflecting light across a track even in the noonday sun. Field knife. A good field knife is essential for use in field craft. Also, a knife may have useful functions for the tracker: marking, digging, cutting, etc. Binoculars. Binoculars are very useful in sighting distant objects. Compass and/or GPS. A compass is very valuable and should be a part of every tracker's kit for providing a direction of travel and orienting the team or communicating your position. If the tracker or team are not proficient in map reading, this is a topic worthy of study. There are a number of gadgets that are available to make the tracking team's life easier. Volume 2 and 3 will specifically deal with technology and weapon systems and how they relate to the team in the field. Lastly, it is important to mention the tracking stick, a tool for measurement. This can be anything from a manufactured tracking stick to many improvised devices that will suffice as a tracking stick. The stick should be at least a yard long.
All right, one of the first things we need to keep in mind is tracks are easily seen if you try to keep the area you're viewing between you and the sun. And right now we have a sun angle straight ahead. And if you'll notice down here, we see disturbance in the ground. Looks like our person crossed through here coming from that direction and has turned left going up in this area here. Let's move around to the side now, and when we get up there, I want to be right behind that first print we see, and I want one of you on each side of me and slightly to the rear. I'll show you how to use a tracking stick. We have a print here and a second print there. Now what I'd like to show you is the use of a tracking stick. If I'll take the tip of my stick and put it on the heel of the second visible print and lay the stick down and use a marker, in this case I'm going to just use my finger, and mark the edge of the first heel, then that distance along that stick is the actual stride. In other words, a single step made by the person we're following. That's the length of that step. If I then take the stick and move it up to the second print where my thumb is and arc that stick in a motion this way, I'll pick up a disturbance at the end of the stick right here, which denotes second footprint. I can continue on doing that, placing the stick on the third print, arcing it, and we see a disturbance at the end of the stick here. This is called the step-by-step method. It's slow, but it really gets you in tune with looking for disturbances in any ground cover that you come across. You have to keep constantly monitoring what kind of ground cover you have in order to look for the various signs. Sign that shows up here easily in the dirt won't be the same out here in the green vegetation when we get up in there. But that's the use of the tracking stick. We have a 30-year-old male. He's available at times You can tell and even feel and smell that this is not an old break. If it was any hotter or had been here any longer, it'd been starting to turn brown, but this is still white. And knowing that the weather has been pretty dry here in the last 2 or 3 days, we can put a print down beside this one, and we can compare the light, the shape, the line, the contrast in color, and all these other things about it with the undisturbed portion of ground. We can scratch that ground. We can put a mark in here and feel the ridge details are real soft. This is soft ground. The same with our good print here we just made. It pretty much determined that this print and that print weren't made too far apart. There is some color change. We'll try to show that here. Here's one that's fairly well in place, and if I pick that up and move it, there is a definite color between this particular area of the soil and this soil around it. Now obviously there's a pock there, but you can still see the grains of sand adhering to this pebble where it was rocked out of its resting place. So that's a good sign. When you see that, something caused that, and you need to look around there to try to find other evidence to go with that. This by itself would not mean much, but when you have all this connected together, you certainly have a good indication of a print there. First of all, we do have pine needles here. This is that kind of ground cover. You also have hardwood leaves, oak and hickory leaves, like in a good oak forest, and also dirt. You got completely grassy areas, some areas with nothing but the gravelly type rocks. So the ground cover can vary from 1 square foot to the next. That's what makes your vision something that you really need to watch when you're out here. You have to vary that vision according to the ground cover, because you're not going to be looking at the same thing or looking for the same thing 3 feet later in your tracking exercise.
Light, sight, sun angle. It is important to attempt to get sign or tracks between you and a light source. When the sun is directly overhead, this will be your most difficult time to track. As the sun is more at an angle, you will find it much easier to find sign and tracks. As a side note, this technique works well in some accident investigations. Skid marks may become visible at the lower sun angle times as well.
One of the things we need to concern ourselves with in tracking is the utilization of light. In this particular case, we've got good sunlight, and I've laid some tracks in this particular sandy area right here. And you can tell by looking at the area first glance there's very little there. However, that's because the sun is behind us. Now what I want to do is move down the lane here and again look at that same area with a good sun shine on the sand, and you'll see that the prints are very visible from this end. I think it's important right now to give you maybe one exception to the rule about sunlight and keeping the tracks between you and the sun. Dave, if you'll look over there at that area I just came through on the grass, there is some pushed down grass that's evident, but not a lot of discoloration or color change as we call it, unless we go back down, and let's do that now, down to the other end here where the sun is actually behind us. And what we'll find is the sunlight catching the grass that is bent over, and you can see it shows a very good color change in the area where the track really stands out.
Team movement, triangle formation, or three-man unit. The basic tracking team should begin with a triangle formation. The tracker works the point, and the flankers work to the sides and cover cross views to the front and rear. This is a non-tactical approach and is recommended for search and rescue work. Y formation. The basic tactical team should begin with the Y formation. This lends itself well to good coverage and the team's ability to respond to threats. The Y is flexible and can bend and transform based on terrain conditions. The team should be careful not to bunch. The natural tendency is to pull in closer to the tracker. This does not help the team, but only limits the team's ability to protect itself and respond to changes in direction and/or threats to the team. Team training. The team should be challenged with scenarios on a consistent schedule. Drills should be rehearsed and conducted, forcing the team to react to all types of possible threats and circumstances. Train in different ground covers, weather, and threat conditions. Developing tracking skills will only enhance the team as a whole. Seek out qualified instructors and invite them to your agency, or schedule classes with them at their facility. Ultimately, the team's ratio of success will be directly affected based on the amount of time spent training together. This training time can be more critical than actual operational time, for it is here in training that you will stack the deck or roll the dice. This project is dedicated to the memory of our brother, Deputy Ken Wimberly, who fell in the line of duty during the production of this video. Ken will always be remembered for his dedication and professional contributions to the brotherhood of police officers and the community of these United States. OSI extends special thanks to the members of the Gwinnett County Special Warrant Service of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Department, and to the Fulton County Sheriff's Reserve and the members of the Reserve's Emergency Response Unit. Every situation is different, and previous training and experience, as well as company policy, state, local, and federal law, should be taken into consideration when dealing with any tactical threat or tracking situation that you may encounter.